Steve Jones here along the shores of the Ottawa River by this set of rapids here that I don't really know the name of, perhaps the Chaudière Rapids, I don't know. Anyways, this is the Island Park Bridge into Gatineau behind me, and these are the rapids right here, and off in the distance you can see the cities of Ottawa and Gatineau off in the distance somewhere. There they are. And so this is the place that I decided. It's an awful lot of activity down here for a Wednesday afternoon, but I guess it's like this all the time. It's a nice spot, so I guess I should understand why. Anyways, I'm here to talk to you today about somebody that I have known of for the past 48 years. Somebody who I have admired from the very first time that I heard his silky smooth Southern Georgian accent. And that man is Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter is a peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia, who went on to enlist in the United States Navy. And after that, he met his wife and his lifelong partner and the real soul of his life. That would be Rosalynn Carter. And he eventually came out of the Navy, got into the peanut business, and then he became the governor of Georgia, no less. And then after that, he did something really impressive. He became the President of the United States back in 1996. Now Jimmy and Rosalynn both, sweetheart of a man, sweetheart of a woman, and together they brought a level of dignity and grace and good manners, and just, my goodness, Jimmy Carter was just a peach of a human being. And he still is, because he's still alive. He's 100 years old now. Unfortunately, I believe in the last year or two, Rosalynn has since passed away, but just the image of these two, you know, well into their 90s, well, even just to the point of Rosalynn's passing, they would regularly walk to church every Sunday holding hands, and they would sit in church and sing the hymns and all that sort of stuff. And then after church, they go right back to that same house that they lived in for their entire lives, including the time that they lived in the White House in Washington. Now, the one thing about Jimmy was that, as I mentioned, he became the president. And he became the president of the United States at a really difficult time. This is the mid-1970s. So he was elected in 1976. He defeated incumbent President Gerald Ford, who himself used to be the vice president of Richard Nixon, but became president after Nixon's resignation back in 1972, I believe, maybe 1974. 1974 it was. And so Ford was running again for re-election as president. Only this time to be elected as president, and of course Carter was the Democratic candidate that ran against him at that time, and of course Carter was successful. And so you know, it's a good news, bad news situation. Congratulations, Jimmy, you're the president. Unfortunately, Jimmy, you're the president. So the oil crisis of the mid-1970s, well, that was the time, it was in those years that Iran exploded, and there was a revolution in Iran. Iran used to be an American ally. Boy, here we are, end of October, and I'm still getting eaten by bugs. And so Iran used to be an ally, but then they overthrew the Shah, and they took a bunch of American embassy employees hostage, and that's how we ended up with the Iran hostage, or sorry, the American, it was a hostage crisis, okay? So much so that the Americans, under the orders of Jimmy Carter, actually mounted a rescue operation that just went sideways, man, with two American planes actually colliding on the ground in the hinterland of Iran as they were getting ready to, you know, they were going to land, they were going to move into Tehran, and they were going to rescue the hostages and bring them all out. And it didn't work out because of this fiasco, this military fiasco. I mean, it's a difficult operation to pull off under the best of conditions. And, you know, the Americans were fairly new at this. So, you know, it's not like today where, well, it would still be, operationally, it would still be a difficult thing for them to do today. Just as an end to that story, while the Americans failed to get their hostages out of Iran in 1979, it's interestingly enough, it was the Canadian ambassador to Iran, a gentleman by the name of Ken Taylor, who spirited out many of the hostages that were in or at risk of becoming captives of the Iranians. And so Canada, through Ken Taylor, received quite a bit of thanks from the American public at that time for those efforts. So as a result of all the stuff that was going on during his presidency, he got challenged in the 1980 primaries by Senator Edward Kennedy, the youngest son of the Kennedy dynasty. His brother, of course, was President John F. Kennedy, and after that, or not after that, but his other brother was Robert F. Kennedy, and both of those guys were tragically assassinated, as you well know. And so it was Edward Kennedy's time to take a shot for the brass ring. Unfortunately, you'd have to get through Jimmy Carter in order to do it. And so a lot of people considered, everybody understood that Carter was just a gorgeous man. And again, that soft southern drawl, I mean, just to die for. It was like silky smooth ice cream.
Crisis of confidence. It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will. We can see this crisis in the growing doubt about the meaning of our own lives and in the loss of a unity of purpose for our nation. The erosion of our confidence in the future is threatening to destroy the social and the political fabric of America.
But it was generally accepted that Carter was too nice of a guy to be president, if you could believe such a thing. But there's truth to that. I mean, when you're dealing with the Soviet Union at the time, those are the kind of guys that are going to take a look at you. And if they think there's anything about you that smells weakness, they're going to try and take advantage of that. And so, as we know, in the election of 1980, Carter was able to get past Kennedy in the Democratic primary, but he was absolutely buried by the new president, Ronald Reagan, in the election of 1980. However, as I said, he was able to get past Kennedy in the primary, and this is a funny little sidebar story. He was interviewed one time prior to that the Democratic Party contest with Kennedy, and it was generally felt in the media and maybe in the population and among Democratic delegates at the time that Kennedy would probably take out Carter and be the guy to face Reagan in the general election. And so that was brought up to Jimmy Carter in an interview, and Carter, in his inimitable way, he kind of it was almost cute where he said, I'm going to kick his ass. And he kind of did that little at the end there where it was like, I think that's the closest time ever that Jimmy Carter ever swore as he walked the earth. Now, as I said, Carter went on to lose to Reagan in his press conference or his media appearance after that event. He said, this hurts. It hurts. Because, really, Jimmy didn't do anything that made anybody think that the United States was any less of an entity than it was before. But, Ronald Reagan came in and he was a Republican, and he just perceived to be much, much stronger. And who's to say that anyone was wrong? I'm sorry, I'm missing. Ottawa is actually over there. I've been showing you Gatineau all this time. But anyways, both fantastic communities. But anyways, Jimmy got some hard knocks there as he was perceived to not be the guy to lead the United States into the 1980s. And who's to say that people were wrong, because it was a decade later that the Soviet Union fell apart. And I have to think that had a lot to do with the presidency of Ronald Reagan, because the Russians perceived him to be absolutely crazy. And so they weren't going to mess around with him at all. And as I said, 10 years later, they fell apart. Geez, I wish they would have stayed that way, because look at them now. They seem to come back and they've got a grievance. And but anyways, that's not part of my story. So I suppose we could assume that Jimmy, and by extension his wife Rosalind and his daughter Amy, would just prattle on down to Georgia with their tails between their legs and do whatever ex-presidents do when they're turfed from office by the electorate. And that's kind of what they did. But they didn't stop their public service there. And in fact, they did more stuff after losing that election than most people do in their entire lives or their entire careers. And so both Jimmy and Rosalind were very big into charity, very big into helping others who needed help. And they began something called the Carter Foundation, which was an organization that basically took it upon itself to make the lives of people much easier, especially the lives of people who lived in places like Africa or other third world countries. And so the Carters always led with their humanity. And basically, if you were to, if you were to be challenged to come up with one word to describe either Jimmy or Rosalind Carter, integrity, that would be one. That would be legitimate. Dignity, and if I can, it's not an adjective, but it's more of a noun. Service. They just dedicated everything they had to this outreach to people who needed help more than they did. And God bless them for doing that. And they did that right till the very end. Jimmy's 100 right now, 100 years old. Rosalind passed away. She was 98, 99. And so, my goodness. And I can't believe, more isn't said about these people. But, sadly, when Jimmy goes, you're going to start to hear the accolades that he so richly deserved, but that he didn't get very many while he was president and while he was in public life.
For America to undertake on this day of a new beginning, than to help shape a just and peaceful world that is truly humane.
So I'm just little old me standing here on the banks of the Ottawa River with Ottawa and Gatineau in the background. And I just want to say, listen, I admire that man and I admire that woman. And I have ever since the time that I first met them. And it goes beyond that silky smooth southern accent of theirs. It has to do with, that was a real man and that was a real woman. And together they were real, honest to goodness. If there's such a thing as people who walk in the image of God, and I don't want to get too, I don't want to get all caught up in hyperbole or anything, but my goodness, those two walked the walk every time they took a step. So Jimmy, here's thinking about you. You'll never see this, but I feel better for doing it. And for the rest of you, any of you who happen to be seeing this, look the guy up. He's worth 5 or 10 minutes of your time, and you just might be inspired to the same degree that I am. I'm Steve Jones, and this is the Ottawa River.